Radhika Coomaraswamy, I thank you so much for making the time for us in your very busy schedule. Welcome, Radhika. I'm so happy that you are with us today.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Karama for asking me to speak today, and specifically Hibat for contacting me in Sri Lanka. I've heard about the good work you have done over the years. This is the first time I have had the pleasure to address you directly. We have a new executive director at UN Women, Dr. Seema Sama Bahu. She is from your region. I want to wish her all the best, especially with regard to the area of women, peace, and security. This will be one of the most challenging aspects of her mandate. When we speak about women, peace, and security, we must always remember its history and inherited tradition. Resolution 1325 came after the wars in Bosnia, Rwanda, some of the worst wars on record for women. The resolution came at a time when the Security Council was united. In 2000, for the first time, the Council passed a resolution that saw serious violations of human rights and humanitarian law as a threat to international peace and security after years of trying to ward this off. Today, I hear people saying the WPS is a security agenda and not a human rights or social justice agenda. If you know the history and the circumstances, you know this is just not true. Women, peace, and security was born in the ferment of those events in the 1990s when human rights, women's rights, and social justice were front and center. The terrible violence in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Rwanda made sexual violence, or what we today call gender-based violence, the first item on the WPS agenda. The Security Council since then has put in place quite a strong architecture in this regard. It has created a special representative on sexual violence. It has a monitoring apparatus in the field for sexual violence. There is regular reporting to the Security Council, and a great deal of information is gathered. The International Criminal Court also has comprehensive provisions with regard to sexual violence. And yet there is great disappointment. Very few cases are public. Very few women come forward. The stigma, the shame, the lengthy process keeps them away. States, prosecutors, and courts also just not doing their job. We have so much faith in the criminal justice systems and too little action. This is forcing many to work toward new approaches at the community level to deal with sexual violence. We must then keep the door open for those women who want accountability in the courts, while also exploring new ideas and new processes of transformative justice for women who want other options. This is a really important area for civil society to continue its work. The second major issue that came thereafter on the women, peace, and security agenda was representation and participation of women in peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. Today, it is the overriding item on the women, peace, and security agenda. We have a strong desire to have women involved in all aspects of the peace process. Gender parity has been and always be the advocacy position in the negotiating teams, in the technical teams, and in the military teams supporting the process. There always must be constant consultation with women's groups while peace processes unfold. There's also a call for parity in the post-conflict situation in all aspects of peace building. Over the years, we have some successes, but not enough progress. The argument we have made from the beginning is not only fairness, 50% of the population should be present in any form of decision-making, but also research has shown that there's a link between women in the peace processes and the sustainability of the peace. For how long are we going to make these arguments before people listen? We must continue to push hard on this issue. In all these discussions that have taken place, we must ask ourselves, what happened to the original peace agenda? Women first began mobilizing on the international stage in the 1920s, fighting for peace and disarmament just before and after World War One. Women for Peace was also the battle cry in the 60s and 70s during the Vietnam War. Today, we have given up on that battle. Our leading intellectuals are saying that we have strengthened humanitarian law, but this, in a sense, has led to endless war. Nation states will not fight for peace in and of itself, but civil society must never give up the battle for peace. We have now spent a decade trying to put women in the military, to get gender parity in the military. We should put the same effort to making peace and making waging war difficult, if not impossible. The time has also come to make new strides and to take new directions in the area of women, peace, and security. The earlier templates for the UN's engagement in peace and security were based on the wars in Southern Africa. New wars are drastically changing the nature of warfare, and women, peace, and security must keep up with the changes. The issue on how to fight violent extremism and face the consequences of the politics and policies of counterterrorism are very important to us, especially in the Middle East and in my region, South Asia. Women are often in very ambivalent situations in these very fraught contexts. I once traveled 5 hours from Kabul into a remote village in Afghanistan when I was special rapporteur on violence against women. Unlike in Kabul, women were very ambivalent. One son was in the army, one in the Taliban. They were just trying to survive. We must have conceptual clarity. We want women as peace builders, those who have access and can help humanitarian work and help bring peace. Such women do yeoman's work. We must respect their independence and autonomy. On the other hand, we cannot support having women as instruments of any counterinsurgency strategy. We cannot put them at risk at present or in the future. This is a crucial lesson to learn from our recent experiences in South Asia and the Middle East. Increasingly also, we are seeing women and girl combatants in wars in the Middle East and South Asia. I have met both women and girl combatants in my work. Again, I remember one in Nepal. When she met me, she was actually very angry with me. She spoke to me with tears in her eyes. She did not want to be rescued. She had left home because of the cruelty of her stepmother. She was angry that I was trying to send her home. This just reminds us that reintegration plans for female combatants must be well thought out. In some countries, these battle-hardened women are packed off to learn beauty culture or sewing as livelihoods, and they're quite miserable. They have skills that can be used in the society at large. The system must take their issues seriously. The problem of female combatants should be an important part of the women, peace, and security agenda. Having said that, we must accept that terrorism in the form of acts of terror by non-state actors is a serious issue in our regions. But I think the back of all our minds who come from the Middle East or South Asia is the definitional problem. What is terrorism? What is violent extremism? Counterterrorism laws, some with very draconian provisions, have been developed and implemented to deal with these concerns all over the world. Securitization policies are the norm. Women and their communities face a great deal of pressure. Counterterrorism can become an assault on the community as a whole. A new issue that no one has really studied is also emerging. There are now de-radicalization programs all over the world for young men and women accused of being susceptible to terrorism. Some of these programs are held in concentration camp-like settings. Others are more flexible and take the role of mentor-student. Different countries have different programs. There's a serious need to study these programs, especially with regard to young women, to ensure their rights and dignity are protected. Another problem in the Middle East and South Asia is the very nature of war, the use of new technologies of destruction and surveillance. There is use of unmanned drones and all manner of weapons we know nothing about. Technology in areas of surveillance, cyber warfare, spyware are all new areas that have real consequences. Even social media. I was on the fact-finding mission on Myanmar. The hate speech connected to Facebook and WhatsApp, leading to rolling violence. The global community must come together to begin regulating all these unregulated, destructive aspects of technology that are linked to war and violence. The Middle East and South Asia are often the guinea pigs for these technologies. Civil society should be in the forefront in calling for international action. Nations by themselves may not act. One must also appreciate that there is technology for good. There have been a lot of scientists now working with humanitarians, developing satellite phones in Congo to stop sexual violence, new style of ovens in Sudan so there's no search for firewood. We must encourage this more, have more scientists and innovators to do humanitarian work. We must harness technology for good and regulate that which is bad. The WPS agenda as it stands today is also very silent on the political economies at the local level where these wars are fought. In the 2015 global study for women in the developing countries, economic and social issues were the most important part of the women, peace, and security agenda. Basically, today, we have global templates of economic recovery for women. And basically, they transport livelihood skills for women from earlier projects from mainly Southern Africa. Low-skill training for saturated markets. We produce hundreds of tailors, cooks, and beauticians. There's a need to think differently. Different, more imaginative programs are necessary. And at the national level, much of the advice and management in our regions come from consulting firms, short-term consultancies. One does a report and goes home. Little coherence, little cohesion. The macro picture is often very messy. The developments in Afghanistan should give us pause to think. We really need to seriously think about post-conflict rebuilding in our region, given the experience of the past few decades. To avoid the terrible cost of war, the international global system has focused on prevention. The Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report for 75th anniversary of the UN puts prevention at the center. There will be now, after this report is adopted, global risk reports, early warning systems will be spelled out. The global study in 2015 spelled 3 areas of prevention. First, if things are tense, the presence, if all parties agree, to civilian or uniformed presence in their areas. The use of technology through drones and satellites to monitor situations, but used in a positive sense. And constant dialogue. Lakhdar Brahimi from Algeria, who was one of my mentors, said, there's the need for dialogue and discussion every time, all the time, at all levels, and with all stakeholders. And women's group must listen to that advice. Women should be in the forefront of dialogue and in the forefront of prevention. In the Middle East and South Asia, women's issues are also part of the political and ideological struggle. It is not a byproduct of conflict like in Rwanda. How do we solve a problem like Afghanistan? That is the elephant in all our rooms. It is an extremely urgent issue. It is not going to be easy, and yet it has so many consequences. We can repeat, and we must repeat, that all of women's rights are human rights, that everyone must implement CEDAW. But we must also brace ourselves to know that nothing may happen except some basics. This is true for both our regions. So how do we move forward? In the 1990s, I was with the International Center for Ethnic Studies in Colombo. We did a lot of work on religion, women, and ethnicity. We brought together all the leading women religious scholars from the different religious traditions of Asia to meet with feminists and activists. We tried to work toward what we called a minimum core of rights that have to be adopted and perhaps advocated for. Those that had a likelihood of being adopted and were what women of that religious tradition were comfortable with. Rights that protected women's consent and autonomy and also ensured economic survival and physical security. All religious and what we call personal laws in our part of the world are subject to this scrutiny. It is not only Muslim law. all based on religious orthodoxies or ethnic orthodoxies. So while waiting for our countries to meet their CEDAW obligations, in the short term, we cannot abandon the women. We must push for a minimum core to protect women in the immediate future. Parts of your region and mine have become the center for instability in the world with regard to war and violence. Women, peace, and security is a crucial item on the agenda for us. For Southern women, the political economy of war and the technologies of war are as important as the fight against sexual violence and the struggle for representation. The WPS agenda, which has come a long distance, must now be ready to move forward in ways that give it full global acceptance. We must struggle hard for all these issues, to fight impunity for sexual violence, to fight for gender parity in peace processes, to deal with the dilemma of women combatants, the use of technologies of war that are just developing as we speak, the rights of women and girls under counterterrorism regimes, and the political, social, and economic rights of women in peace building. But most importantly, we must unite on a global struggle for peace, peace as an end in itself. Your organization has a major role to play in this regard. I wish you all success.
Thank you so much. I should call you Your Eminence. Thank you very much. That is absolutely eye-opening. I think I'm going to change, and with respect to Endai, who's going to be the sire of this whole 2 days, I would like to at least open for 2 questions, or because I think it would be unfair for Radhika to just say Radhika is her heart is with the people, and she's one of us. So I think it will be very important. I'm just going to be a dictator. I'm from Somalia, so I'm allowed. It comes with my DNA. But I would like to have the first question, and then I would have Lily, and then I would have somebody else. I think Lamis also said that. My first question is, Radhika, do you think the agenda of women, peace, and security has been hijacked by the North? Those who are selling the weapons, those who are declaring wars, those who are selling the drones, and at the same time trying to come up with peace, or they tell us that they come up with peace even though they're coming up with contracts for oil. So, and I would leave it at that.
I am and was and expressed in my, as you know, in my note in which I presented myself during the recent campaign, as someone who is deeply concerned with the securitization of the women, peace, and security agenda, and moving it away from its roots in human rights and social justice. I do feel I am not a great fan of making the centerpiece of this agenda getting women into the military, because if you're also fighting for peace, that can't be. I mean, we want parity, we want women in the military, of course, but I think the issue is that we cannot go away from a peace agenda as well. That must be in context of also fighting for peace. And the securitization of the agenda to some extent has led to a lack of interest in the global South's political economy, the global South's underdevelopment. The global South has become an experiment. I mean, all these weapons are tried out on us, mainly in Middle East and South Asia. So I don't want to call it a North-South divide, but I think we have to resist the further securitization. People talking in terms that women, peace, and security is a security agenda. It's not it was never meant to be a security agenda. Member states may want it to be a security agenda, but it came really, prevention, protection. These are the words in the original document. It's not about just making deals and finding representation only. Protection, sexual violence was very much a part of it, but also prevention, participation, and economic recovery. So I think we have to keep the people, human rights focus of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And we are alienating the Southern academics are totally against the Women, Peace and Security agenda. If you read the stuff that I read on women, peace and security, they're very much against it because of this, the securitization, that it's become taken over, relying on the Security Council to do all this work, and that's not the basis and all this. So we have to regain the momentum with regard to women, peace and security, and root it clearly in the human rights and social justice, women's justice, people factor.
Excellent, thank you very much. I didn't see, but there is Karashanti from FAR who has a question. Karashanti, can you hear us?
Actually, thank you very much, Hibak, and thanks a lot for your remarks, Radhika. I didn't have a question, but I wanted to agree with the question you had, Hibak, to say that given that I am in the global north, very close to the belly of the beast, that I don't think peace is the WPS agenda for the global north countries. It is about making war safe for women. Thank you.
Let me just say that, I don't know if you all know, there's a recent book that has been released by this very much the issue among academia called Humane by this Yale professor called Samuel Moyn, in which he argues that really this humane and humanitarian law emphasis that we've had for the last 3 decades has actually made war endless. Because people don't need to end it. I'm not saying he doesn't argue that you should not have humanitarian law, but he's just saying that only focusing on the humane and not focusing on peace and getting to peace and getting to ending it is a real issue. And I think we really have to rephrase this, take it over, this women, peace and security emphasis from securitization, making it only humanitarian in law rather than fight for peace.
Okay, Lily.
Okay, thank you, Hibak. And thank you, Radhika, for a very insightful presentation. My concern is also about WPS. Now, under the pretext of security, I think a lot of wars are being waged. And I agree with Hibak that the powerful countries are waging war, selling arms under the pretext of security. My concern is about our situation. Doesn't mean that I don't care about the Arab world. I do care a lot. But we are under occupation in Palestine. I'm a Jerusalemite, a Palestinian, and the problem is that we do not see any action. We hear strong condemnation, but that's about all. The Secretary General, everybody in the world, in the powerful big countries, they talk about condemning. They talk about their worries of what's happening. But one thing we Palestinian women and children need is protection and prevention, definitely. And it should be highlighted to everyone that we are suffering from a lot of human rights abuses and harassment. And of course, the label is racism, okay? The struggle in Jerusalem, and tomorrow you will hear from people who live in Sheikh Jarrah and in other areas, that nothing is being done. Okay, there is a lot of lip service from the international community, but actually there is no action. Now, how can we, okay, in your presentation, you talked about the original agenda, the original resolution, why was it issued and so forth. But after the war in Bosnia and Rwanda, we didn't see any action, real action from Security Council about other areas and what's happening in other areas. As civil society, we've been working, I think, in all the women here in the Karama family have been working on this, on advancing the UN Resolution 1325 in our own countries, okay? But the thing is that Security Council is not helping in the implementation. Now, if some countries, their priority is to have women participation in decision-making positions, that's okay. I want it also in Palestine. If some countries are working on security issues, anti-terrorism, also I want it here. But also I want for my people, for my women, for my children, I want protection and prevention. And how can we move forward to do that?
Well, let me just say, you know, when I was special representative on children in armed conflict, I came to Palestine and Israel quite often, went into Gaza as well. I just feel, you know, the UN has two kind of things have happened since the original 1325. On the one hand, the positive thing is that we're getting, as Krishanti said as well, the humanitarian part right now. We, you know, I was in Cox's Bazar when the Rohingya refugees came in, because I was part of the fact-finding mission. I saw how UNHCR, you know, put pictures, the tents, you know, they do it chuck. You know, they do it completely in order. They get things moving. The humanitarian part of the UN has improved massively, but we have deteriorated in the political part of the UN and the ability to make political decisions. The Security Council is now very much, I think, based on deal making. It's based on big power politics. There was in the 1990s a window when actually people agreed on certain human rights issues. That's why they acted on Bosnia and won a whole host of countries. But after 2001, the war on terror, and after things changed in Russia, and even China in the 1990s was very pragmatic. You know, I used to talk to them, and you know, it was. But now they've also become quite ideological. So I think political decision making to intervene, and also Libya went so totally wrong. The political decision making to intervene and sort out is going to be very difficult, as we saw in Afghanistan now and whatever. So what we can do is really go through the other route of the humanitarian and the humane and the peace and security mandates to make life better for women and children. I think that's what we can hope for at the moment. Of course, the ICC has opened a case on Israel and Palestine, so there's that route also. But I think the era of the Security Council acting politically to get things done is not there now and won't be for some time.
Thank you so much. There are so many people who want to ask. Yes, so many people who want to ask questions. We're running 25 almost minutes, and we really do appreciate Radhika, your extensive answers. And I think the beat goes on. What else can we say? We'll be here again, but just to be, you know, pragmatic. I think what you're talking about, let's be practical and not idealistic, and see what we can do, the little we have with the little we can do. And I think that's exactly what we are going to do. But I think that this is the beginning of collaboration between Asia and the Middle East women, and it's extremely important. Similar cultures, similar politics, similar, you know, history. And I think it's only when we come together that will bring in difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hopefully to see you again and again as the president of Sri Lanka, if not the general secretary of the UN.
I know my limitations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.